Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I am honored to have my guest on, Miss Darrian Tanner. I'm going to have her introduce herself. So why don't you tell the people, please, who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Hello, everyone. My name is Darrian Tanner. I am a high school English teacher, 10th grade. And so I've been teaching for 14 years. I did my first 2 years in Michigan in middle school, English, 7th and 8th grade. And then now these 12 years now as a high school English teacher. So I grew up loving school. My aunties were principals and teachers and superintendents and so forth. And so I just always had a love for school. And I knew from a very young age I wanted to be a teacher. It was like a dream. Like some people dream to be lawyers and
Mm.
doctors. Teaching to become a teacher was a dream, and it was a tough journey getting there. And so again, I love what I do. This is my 5th year as an instructional mentor. And so I work with first, second, and third year teachers on campus as well. So I teach part time and then work with teachers the rest of the day. And so I've been doing that for 5 years. So it's a dream because I love working with educators as well. So this position affords me to be able to do both work with the students in the classroom and then work with the teachers in their classroom. So it's been great so far.
Wow. I definitely want to dive into the coaching aspect. As you know, when I first hear that, I think it's one thing to be a reflective person for who you are and how you bring things to the table. It's another to kind of lead through others
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
try to get them to be reflective, get them to grow in areas, and for them to trust you enough to be able to say, this is going to help you, not hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been your experience? How would you quantify like your experience, I guess you would say, in coaching other teachers, good, bad, or indifferent?
So at the beginning, there were challenges
Hmm.
because I'm not like the technical teacher. And so I don't like to be kind of put in the box like this is what you're going to follow steps 1, 2, and 3. And it kind of came with that package because I mean I'm working for them. So this is not something I'm doing on my own. But as the years progressed,
Yeah.
they allowed us to be flexible. So now, so at first it was kind of like I don't want to, when I visit the teachers, I don't want it to be, oh, here comes Miss Tanner. We're going to do this lesson plan 1, 2, 3, and not really be able to be flexible and adapt to what they need at the time because I'm trying to work on tools to document, numbers and hours and all that to keep the grant. And so it was a little bit tough at the beginning because I didn't want to be the teacher that's coming and everything is dull and we got to fill out paperwork and all this kind of stuff. And so, but now I say within the past 2 years or so, they've allowed me to be very
Mm.
flexible so I can kind of flow easy. And so when I go visit teachers, it's not, I'm not like another obligation or something. It's something that they want to do. We mentor, we talk about many different things. And so oh my gosh, I've learned so much because I'm observing classes too. So I've learned so much observing classes about my own practices.
Mm.
I've learned from them as well. And so it's just been great working with the adults. And for the
Yeah.
most part, they've been very receptive because sometimes that's tough too when
Hmm.
you have adults working with other adults. You got to get rid of pride, and things like that in order to listen to another adult, even if it's your first or second year.
Absolutely.
So they've been very supportive and open, and so it's been a great opportunity working with teachers. So after the classroom, I really want to just work with teachers full time, and so so that
Mm.
these 5 years has been great for me to experience.
You mentioned like you coming from almost like a pedigree of teaching, of
Hmm.
education.
Hmm.
Um, so growing up knowing that this is what you want, this is what you dreamed of,
Hmm.
I don't find, at least in my experience, I found that people kind of have either stumbled into the field or some people have loved it and kind of found it along the way. But you're
Hmm.
saying you almost were like groomed for this. This
Hmm.
has been what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Talk to me about little Miss Tanner, if you will. Talk to me about growing up and feeling like, oh, this is what I wanted to do. What was that experience like? Like, were you teaching the stuffed animals at home? Like, what was that
Def-
like?
Definitely so. And so I have an identical twin sister who also teaches. And so we
Oh my
literally got
goodness.
off. Yep. And it's funny because we work right across the hall from each other. She's ninth grade English and I'm 10th grade. So some of her students, they've had both of us. It's crazy. They're like, what is happening right now? And so, but no, so we together, we got our stuffed animals and our Barbie dolls. And we said we were maybe like third, fourth grade after school and we would get them all together. And here's the crazy part. So we have maybe 15.
Hmm.
So we'll pass out paper, little slips of paper. This is imaginary. I'm sorry, they're imaginary. So we're just passing out papers to these dolls. Take the test for all 15. So we literally we taking their test. grading it like we don't know what they're going to get. It was crazy. And so we just imagining, and we're teaching, and we did this for years. Of course, when we got older, it was like, okay, now this will be a little crazy. And then we started playing it with our cousins who are also in education. And so, like I
Mm,
said, it was just the love was just there since the beginning. And I also really loved the school and the teachers that taught me. And so, outside of having my auntie's hand, and I believe it was a God-given gift as well. Um, he just always loved
mm-hmm.
school in the process. And so, I mean, that's where it all started. And so sometimes people ask me how many years have I been teaching? And I'll say almost 35 years, because I'm like, that's when I was a teacher, when I was talking to those little stuffed animals, that's when it started for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's what we did. That's how it worked out.
As someone who grew up with this love and this passion, what was it like being a student in school? Was your educational experience one where did you love school? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I loved school. Even during the middle school ages when I started to, you start trying to figure out who you are, and then dealing with self-esteem issues. But even though I dealt with other things, I feel like I did add up to other like whatever little girls deal with stuff, not feeling this way about beauty and all of that. So that journey started for me, but I knew I always had school. So this was something I was always
Mm,
good at, that I could lean on, because I love to write. And so even though I may not have been able to be the popular girl or the girl that all the guys liked, or the girl that was seen as, the pretty girl of the school, even though I didn't have that, I knew that what I did have was the gift of writing, and I just love school and love learning. So my experiences were
mm,
great, even despite having those issues growing up in middle school and even in high school. Because our high school was pretty tough. We walked through metal detectors every
mm,
day. It was a tough East St. Louis high school. It
mm,
was pretty tough, but the teachers were great. And so, actually, the teacher that really inspired me to become an English teacher was my 12th grade English teacher. And so, because I still didn't know I
oh,
wanted to do English, I just knew I wanted to teach, and I didn't know it was going to be high school. But when I got in 12th grade, she was the one, my English teacher, inspired me to actually go into, I want to do high school English or secondary ed. So, again, like I said, it was something I leaned on because I felt like it was something that I had, and other things too. But you know how you feel like
mm-hmm.
you have a gift, and it's like, okay, work with what you have. This is what you're good at. Embrace this, cultivate that. And so, school was always like that for me.
I asked that question. I read a book not too long ago.
Mhm.
It's called Transforming School Culture.
Mhm.
And in the book, the author talks about basically four camps of teachers. He says you have your believers. Those are the ones who, they want to come in, they want to charge the hill, you know, they're willing to do the task, whatever the thing is, they want to help, right?
Mhm.
You have your yeah, almost like your newcomers. I forget what he calls them. You have your tweeners, it's the people who are in between, and then you have
Mhm.
your fundamentalists. And he talks about the fundamentalists being the teachers who kind of have come through the educational sector, educational system, and they've gone through this traditional model of school.
Mhm.
And because they've gone through it and been successful, they feel like these kids today should go through exactly the same thing that I went through, the same exact way, because it worked for me.
Mhm.
And so those are the ones where you find that they're not trying to change or adapt. If there's some type of new modality or new type of pedagogy, that no, this
Mhm.
is what worked for me. It should work for them.
Mhm.
And so I asked that question with the backdrop of understanding, like, I know that you approach these things differently because you've wrought really, you've written thoughtfully on these topics. And so
Mhm.
it makes me wonder, what is it, and this is my question for you, what
Mhm.
is it that would allow for a teacher to say, okay, if this is the way I experienced it, I shouldn't have to change. They should have to adapt to what's worked for me. Does that make
Mhm.
sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think you just can't see another way. So
Yeah.
if you experience this is just like your whole life, you're thinking it's the
Yeah.
same for everybody. So you can't see a different way. And if you're not willing to be open to a different way, this is it. I mean, with anything, with any subject matter,
Yeah.
any part of life, it's just like if I only see one way, I'm stuck on that one way. So I think that, and I had that, I had that issue for sure when I first started
Hmm.
teaching, and even now, you sometimes you have to flush things through. But I had that issue because I love school so much and I love my teachers so much, and I was like, this is going to work. And I had to learn through the process, through the years, that there were some things I had to change. Not everything works for everybody. So, but I understand that because that's all I knew. So
Mm.
everybody else had different stories, but I had my story, and I was just so inspired, and I was like, this is what I want to do with the kids of this generation. And some things work and some things didn't. So I just think the reason why teachers may stay stuck on that is because this is all they know, and they may not be open to other ways just yet
Yeah.
because because they like, this was successful, this could work.
So talk to me a little about what that was like, where you kind of hit those rough patches where you're like, this isn't really working,
hmm
and how you had to change. Like, for those who are listening and are like, maybe that's me. Maybe that
hmm
I'm the person that I still need growth and development in those areas, and maybe they can learn from hearing your story.
your school life is kind of a part of who you are, and so kids bring
Yeah.
different experiences from home. And so I grew up in a rather pretty good child home. I had a pretty good childhood. And so I didn't understand how some kids could come to school, and just have these issues or this trauma, different things like that, because I didn't necessarily bring that to school. So I'm just kind of, and
Hmm.
again, not perfection, but just saying there are some things I was kind of sheltered. I never dealt with as a kid. And so I'm just thinking that kids are able to come to school freely and just do whatever and learn. And they love to learn. They know how to read. They have certain skills already, And so I thought
Hmm.
about myself as a kid and what I had and what I was able to bring to the school. And so in my mind, when I became a teacher, I felt that all students had that, had
Mm.
that same privilege or experience, if you will. And so I can come to school. I'm fine. I had a shower, I had food. Dad dropped me off. That was my life. And so I was able to, come to school that way. But then when I became a teacher, and I started to see, wait a minute, these students have different stories, and so it's not that easy for some of them. Like, it's school doesn't work that way, especially high school, because now I have them older, or middle school. So I missed that, the foundational ages. So now I'm getting them older when they may have experienced they may have experienced certain things, and so they may not have the foundation that I had and why I love school. So I had to understand, because I would get upset if a kid came in and was like, I don't want to read, or I don't want to read this way, I don't want to talk, because I didn't understand that, because I'm like, why is it? But then when I started to see, your reality is not their reality. And not saying they had to have
Mm.
bad homes, but they didn't grow up the way you did, or maybe they did, but it's just students bring different things to school. And I didn't understand
Yeah.
that as a beginning teacher. Like I said, you just have your own. I'm still thinking about my childhood, my teachers. So this has to work. But I didn't think about the student, and what they brought, to the table. And so when I saw that certain things didn't work because of my expectations, then I had to start figuring out what their stories were and how they like to learn, and certain things that I had to do. Now I still kept some of the traditional things. I think,
Hmm.
that still works, but I had to just change my expectations for the
Yeah.
better, because again, I had to think about the student and what they brought to the classroom, and not everybody has the same foundation, so it's going to be a little bit different.
Absolutely. I think you make such a valid point. So much of education is realizing the invisible backpack that our students bring to the table, like they bring to
Mm-hmm.
school, right? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
carrying things with them that we may
Mm-hmm.
not be able to see. And what you're talking about is the process of us as teachers, decentering ourselves enough to be able to see that it may not even be personal. Like, it's not even about you per se, as
Mm-hmm.
much as it's about what they are encountering with it, whether it be the subject matter, whether it be the ideology of how they see themselves as a student, their resistance to what you're bringing to the table may have nothing at all to do with you and everything to do with how they arrive
Mm-hmm.
at school. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's hard for us to see that because
Yeah,
maybe we
especially
didn't
for
grow
me.
up like that. And I think it's easy for us to criticize,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I distinctly remember, because I grew up primarily with my grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
and so they would always talk about these kids today, and the previous generation would be like, these kids, like it just kind of is the the mantra of how one generation understands the other, and and so there's this weird space that I'm existing in because being raised by my grandparents, where it's like, oh, I would have never said something like that to my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents. And some of the ways that my students will approach matters or say certain things, there's
Mm-hmm.
parts of it, if I look hard enough, where I'm like, I'm glad that you feel conviction enough to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's work on how you're saying it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we
Mm-hmm.
don't even see that strength because It wasn't how we were brought up. It's not something that we are taught to even see that way. So I think you're bringing up so many valid points. Let's do this. If you were to look at your classroom
Mm-hmm.
when you first started
Mm-hmm.
and your classroom today, just snapshots,
Mm-hmm.
what were some of the biggest things that, let's put it this way, some things that you stuck with that worked, timeless? If you saw it day one, or let's say first few years, you'd
Mm-hmm.
still see it today.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are some things that you were like, leave that in Miss Tanner when I first started, but today this is how I do it. So what are some of those things in your classroom?
Some of the things, well, this one is kind of both, and I'm gonna explain what I mean. So
Okay.
my first day, and I'm gonna go with high school because when I came to Florida, I taught high school for the first time, so I was very nervous, and
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out because I'm a sensitive person, like me I'm just a
Mm,
sensitive person, and so anything in words, stuff like. Well, I grew up. I mean, I'm stronger now, but I'm just saying I used to be so sensitive, and I'm like I'm about to be a high school
yeah.
teacher. That I don't. We got to figure out. We have to figure out how this is going to work. And so I came into the classroom not really knowing what kind of attitude or what kind of, if I should be firm, if I should be extra nice and so forth. And so what happened was I went maybe a little bit because I was again sensitive. So again, this is about me. So I have this shield now. Um, I came across a little bit too firm at the beginning.
Mm,
And what happened was the students respected, now this was 2011. So the students
mm,
respected me, but what happened was some of them started to fear me in a sense of some of the girls, not the boys, but the girls started to kind of have a fear of me, and I didn't like that. I was like, that's not the image I want to have because I work with girls, work with them with self-esteem and all that. I want to be a woman that they can come talk to. And so because I'm trying to kind of
yeah.
guard myself, I'm doing, I'm a little bit too firm. And because I'm not a normal firm, that's not me normally, but I feel like I had to put extra. So it wasn't like they didn't get attitudes or anything. It wasn't even like that. It was just that it was kind of like they were scared. And so I was like, I can't be this type of teacher, which is so interesting because they're like, how is somebody scared of this little bitty lady? You know what I mean? And I don't know, to this day, I don't know why, because like I said, it's not me, but because I'm coming in with my own feelings and emotions, and taking things personal, like you just talked about, I was kind of too firm, and so that they didn't open up and so forth. So then, of course, as the years went
Mm,
by, I was like, okay, let's soften up just a little bit. But I feel like I still have
mm-hmm.
like now. So now you see, so I softened up a little bit throughout the years, and now in 2023, you'll see a pretty good balance of that. And so I call it the Rogers and Clark principle. And so what I do is compare Mr. Rogers to Joe Clark from Lean on Me, and
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
say it's the balance of both. So when I was not Joe Clark, but I'm saying I was more on his side when I first started. But then I started to say, okay, look,
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers, he's not. I probably can't be that soft, in teaching high school. So I wanted to blend them together. So in
Yeah.
2011, you probably will see a teacher that's kind of too firm and not really opening up with relationships and things like that because I'm covering myself, which is not a good thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just being honest. And in 2023, you'll see kind of that blend of both where I'm able to be firm, but
Mm-hmm.
also warm at the same time. So that's kind of
Mm,
that's kind of a difference because like classroom management is a huge thing to me. I just feel like you can't teach without that structure. And so that's why that was
yeah.
the first thing I mentioned. Also, when I first began, I wasn't as with the lesson planning and things like that. I planned lessons, but I wasn't really as technical and looking at standards, just really teaching skills and things that I needed to teach in that subject area. I was more so, as I moved past the tough person, I was more so, okay, now let's do the relationships, let's have discussions. And it was like, wait a minute, let's get to the academic part too. So in those beginning years, you
Yeah.
would see me more so, not really, I've never really been like the cool teacher that let you get away with everything, but things were just a little bit more flexible and relaxed. But then as I moved forward, I was
Yeah.
like, no, let's teach skills and let's balance them both out. And so now in 2023, you kind of see a balance of skills and still discussion and still relationship. So those are the two
Yeah.
biggest things: the climate I created in the classroom as a teacher, and then just some of the activities and some of the things we did pertaining to lessons in the classroom would be some differences you'll see.
the wisdom in that, I think, is profound because sometimes we as educators can't get of our own way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we stick with the same routine. We're not willing to adapt. We're not willing to grow in some ways. And that's not everybody, right? Like, I'm not trying to say every teacher is like that, but I do think that there is a prevailing sense in which, because, and I think some of this has to do with education always throwing something else at the wall and hoping that it sticks. And then teachers are like, I'm not doing that. Do you know what I mean? You know, you talk about classroom management, you talk about relationships. And some of these things can be trigger words depending on certain teachers and where they're coming from and their experiences. For example, relationships. Relationships has been used as this catch-all term for how you solve issues in the classroom. Let's build relationships. And hear me, I am a relationships person. If there's something I do well, I'll build relationships with my students.
Mm-hmm.
I have to work at
Mm-hmm.
going towards more like like you're talking about the Joe Clark side of things. That's me. I
Mm-hmm.
know it. I work at it. I'm constantly thinking about it, and I'm constantly trying to balance between those two.
Mm-hmm.
But so for other people, they hear relationships and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're that person,"
Mm-hmm.
and they might even just tune us out.
Mm-hmm.
So a book, you've written several books actually. You're doing your thing. But teacher authority in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about that work, and specifically a starting point is, how do you view classroom management? And you can kind of just launch into your book and what you've written for us.
Okay. So the teacher authority in the classroom, that really was a spin. So I'm an English teacher. And much like yourself, because I see a lot
Yeah.
of your videos and things, you like using analogies and stuff. I do too. And so I teach
Yeah.
Dr. King's Letter from Birmingham Jail. And so in the letter, he
Yeah.
talks about tension, this idea of tension and how he dealt with the white powers that be at that time. He was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cause tension so that they would move. So as a teacher, I started thinking
Yeah.
like as far as the students, and again, when I say relationships too, it's a little bit different. It doesn't have to be like mentoring per se, like you buy them stuff or you talk to them after school, because some of that was cut off at the pandemic, but just having been able to relate to them. But anyhow,
Mhm.
so I was like, okay, so here's how you have to deal with
Yeah.
students. Tension. So I started thinking about the word tension, and then I thought about who does Good Trouble.
John Lewis. Yes.
Yeah,
John
yeah.
Lewis.
Okay. So he had this idea of good trouble, and talks about how you cause trouble, but it's for the good. So what I did was take good
Yes.
and tension, and I said good tension. And when I was thinking about classroom management and how you deal with the students, I was like, it's about bringing good tension, because we dealt a lot with students being not wanting to do things, and the laziness of the culture as we got through the years, especially the pandemic. And it was like, how am I going to get students to move? What do we need to do? Because I was working with a lot of teachers who were afraid to address students. They were afraid to deal with what was
Mhm.
going on. And I started thinking about the principle of walking on eggshells in your classroom. And so my whole book is centered around, how do you cause good tension in the classroom? How do you get kids to work and them not have an attitude with you? It's a good thing. I'm putting pressure on you to work and so forth. So that's why it's not a battle, it's a bargain. Because I didn't want to come across as it's this hard thing. It's challenging, but I didn't want it to be like be going against the students. It's actually a bargain,
Yeah.
when you bring that good tension and when you bring that pressure and when you bring that accountability. So the book kind of centers around that good tension piece. And then for just a little bit, and it was crazy because I didn't know about the pandemic coming up, and I know people were watching the news, but I was kind of clueless to what was happening in the world because I really don't watch the news. But anyhow, I did one chapter called Monster
Mm.
Hurdle, and because it was kind of
Mm.
centered around track too. Like I said, I did it's a lot of analogies in this book, but it was centered around
Analogies.
track.
Yeah.
And I was just like, a monster hurdle. It's a monster hurdle coming. And it was entertainment. It was just like the social media, the cell phones. This is coming, and this is going to be a huge problem, because I already started seeing it in the education in the classroom. And so, like I said, so I was like, this issue is coming. How can I help teachers manage the classroom, I'm doing fairly well in it, and I wanted to help teachers with something that I've kind of, been able to conquer a little bit and just get some footage in, and so which is classroom management. And they were like, I can't have personal relationships with 150 students, so how am I being able to manage and structure a classroom and students have to respect good tension? So I'm holding the
Mm.
students accountable. It's a good thing. It's healthy. I'm not pushing them to do something that they don't want to do, but it's just like that good tension that I'm bringing so they move and, they start being productive. And so that's why the whole book is
Mm-hmm.
kind of centered around that perspective of classroom management, because there's so many books, like I said, I was trying to figure out what to do. That hadn't really been, because you can go to Barnes and Noble now, so many classroom management books. You can go to Google, people got blogs. And I was like, what is it distinctly that I do that would be different that could help
Mm-hmm.
teachers? And so I just used my, again, love for literature and just, talked about that, the principle of good tension, and kind of just, worked around that frame for the book.
I think there's so many aspects of that I think could help us all as educators.
Mm-hmm.
One that I'm hearing that makes me think about is, you know, you talk about it being almost like an invitation for the student. Like I'm pushing you because I'm inviting you to the greater self that I see in you already.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
see that you can get here, and so this is me bringing you along the process, which then changes the landscape, right? Because now it's not me versus you to
Mm-hmm.
do the task. It's me alongside you, helping you get to the hurdle you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, which is where those relationships come in,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's this shift in us needing to be center stage to us then sharing the stage, if you will, to come
Mm-hmm.
alongside our students to say, this is what you can do. This is where you can be.
That's 100%. That's exactly. And then also, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but that's also what led to the potluck experience. Because if you, like I
Yes.
said, I'm listening to you, and you really just defined the potluck experience. So that's how that all bridged together, the whole perspective.
Mm.
And then here come the potluck experience, to go deeper into the
Take
whole
us there.
classroom. And so yeah, so um, after the pandemic, so in 2020, of the fall of 2020, when we came back to school, I saw full force the issue with the entertainment. It was crazy. I was like, I ain't never seen nothing like this in my life. The addiction of the cell phones. I just had, it was mind blowing to me, the fact I just didn't understand. And so I had one
Yeah.
class and I taught two online, and I was just like, what is going on with the students? It was crazy to me, the addiction to just social media, movies, Netflix, and of course we had the pandemic and everybody was coming out. So this was the whole world, not just the teenagers, but this was the whole world. And so I'm thinking about, so I taught that year, and so I was like, okay, it's time for another book. I kind of was inspired to do another one, but again, I'm sticking to what I do. I don't have, I'm not coming up with new things per se. This is really what I've learned throughout the whole entire time. And so then, as you were speaking, this is how I bridged into the pilot experience. And so I was like, what else?
Yeah.
What's going on? Because now students are coming in the classroom and not doing anything. Like it's just coming in like
Mm.
zombies. And I'm gonna talk about my experience because I don't want other teachers to get offended. And I'm talking about my experience and some of the experiences of the teachers that I worked with. Just coming in
Yeah.
done. Like I was like, who am I talking to? Literally. And I was like, what is going on with these students? And we didn't want to do
Yeah.
anything, coming in tired, lazy, not want to do. I had a one girl, and this is when I first found out about TikTok because I didn't know about it before. And so I had one girl
Yeah.
I'm talking about, and she wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but she could not put her phone down. And so she'll do an assignment and she's back on. So one day I was like, I'm not gonna get upset. What is it on your phone? What's happening? And it was TikTok. And so I started doing research. But anyhow, so I was like, okay, this is a major problem. And so I started thinking about the traditional teaching method, and I started to compare it to a regular party. And so, you go to a party,
Mm.
they did all of the decorations, they set up the agenda. All you gotta do is come with your gifts, sit, and do whatever. You can dance if you want to, but you didn't have any input in the development of the party, and that's not a bad thing. But I had been going to a lot of parties because my church community, had a lot of celebrations, and so I was used to it. And then one time there was a potluck, and because I really didn't know a lot about potlucks, and so one time there was a potluck, and I was like, what's happening. And so again, me being kind of an introvert, I mean, I like being around people, but still I'm not like the life of the party. So I love the party. Hey, everything's done. Go in, drop your gift off. You can sit back and just, enjoy people, what have you. You don't have to do anything per se. So I thought about that as the
Yeah.
classroom, and that's really what was happening as teachers. All this lesson plan, we got all this activities and agenda, kids coming in. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't, on the cell phones, watching this, and I not, not with me, like I said, I couldn't, you're not gonna do that. You know what I'm saying? I had to nip that in the bud, but just observing other teachers, that's what they were doing. And so the teachers doing all this work, they up there at teaching kids on cell phones, watching Netflix series. It was crazy, but the teacher is throwing the party. The teacher's doing all the entertainment. The kids bring nothing. And so when I started to go more in depth with the research of what entertainment means, so what happened was, so I looked up
Mm-hmm.
entertainment, and entertainment meant to be like consumed. Somebody has your imagination. You're not imagining yourself. Somebody has your imagination. They're imagining for you. So teachers are teaching, they learning for you because they're doing everything. And I was like, that cannot be the case. So when I figured out
Mm.
potluck is, so when I had to go to the grocery store, when I had to bring something, when I had to go figure out, so here I am out shopping, trying to figure out what to bring. I got to bring something to the table for this potluck. I can't just come with a gift. Now I have to bring something. So now I'm going to be a part of the
Yeah.
experience. And if I don't bring nothing, it's going to affect it. So now here I come, potluck, I'm bringing something to the table. So I was like, party, potluck experience, the classroom. So then that's when so that's why I got that in another analogy again, the potluck experience, that if we're going to do this, we're going to
Yeah.
have to inspire or have students bring something. Like, you guys are going to be a part of this process every single day.
Okay. Okay. You made me think of like my kids. So
Mm-hmm.
my son, uh, my son's 11, and my daughter's 8.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say, hey, hey, babies, come down, it's time to eat. Sometimes they do this thing where they walk past me and they go sit down at the table and they're waiting to be served.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I am not your waiter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm your father.
Mm-hmm.
Get up, get some forks, get up, get some napkins, get some plates, set the table
Mm-hmm.
because we're family. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't come to the table without bringing something to the table, without helping to arrange the table
Mm-hmm.
because you're a part of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a long time, I'll tell it myself. I think for a long time in my educational experience, I would at least say the first 5, maybe even 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
I set the table in my classroom like it was Burger King. You come have it your way. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna I You don't have to even order. Matter of fact, you come sit down, everything's gonna come to you. Right?
Wow.
When you go to a restaurant, you get served.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I set my classroom up that way to the point where there was no expectation for students. And not only was there not an expectation, they didn't have to bring anything to the table, they didn't have to produce anything. And at the end of the day, they still got to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus if
Mm-hmm.
they had to bring something to the table and now our experience is enhanced because you brought something.
Mm-hmm.
You added to what we have. I'm inviting you into the journey. Um, so what you're talking about, like I lived it. I could see it in my teaching practice. Like things
Mm-hmm.
changed when I said, it's not going to be me going and getting the groceries,
Mm-hmm.
preparing the meal,
Yeah.
putting it down, putting it on your plate, grabbing your hand, taking the fork and making you eat it, and then saying to you, that's good, right? Right? Like it's not
Yeah.
going to be that. I'm going to invite you into the process. That leads me to asking you this. When we talk about teachers who may have a difficulty moving from, the restaurant, if you will, experience to the potluck experience,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the biggest deterrents? Like, what are some of the things that teachers should be on the lookout for to say, I need to change these things in order to have a more potluck experience?
You're going to have to release control. And I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and that's again, I had to deal with that too, because of course, when if you have everything prepared, you control it. I'm throwing a party,
Yeah.
I control everything, and so I don't have to worry about it going a certain way because I've controlled the whole thing. And I think because
Absolutely.
when you get out of that and you kind of trust the students a little bit, because um, I always talk about the original meaning of education, which means to draw out. And so
Yeah.
in order to draw out of you're going to have to trust them because it's in them. You know what I mean? Like they have something to bring to the table. And so you have to kind of release some of that power that you have, or the control you want to have in the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of trust
Mm-hmm.
the students a little bit because it's in them. And I see it every single time, every single time, every single time. I have a 10th grader boy. I think he's 18. He just came to me last week. He's 18. He can't
Mm-hmm.
read at all, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, what? I'm like, I'm talking about can't read. He may be first grade. I don't know. You know what I mean? But he has something. And I'll tell you what, that boy, he always discussing. He's always talking, because I'm asking lots of questions. Again, I'm like, you're not about to sit here. Okay, let's talk. Let's do whatever because he has it. And I'm already seeing his potential. So like I said, you have to trust the students a little bit. And none of the students have never let me down with this. Like I said, you may have your knuckleheads or what have you, and skippers and things like that. But what I'm saying is that the students that kind of sit there and they're like, okay, I got something to offer. They never let you down. And it's okay
Yeah.
to release that trust, and to release that power. So that's the biggest thing is that teachers want to control, even though what you've been doing wasn't working per se. You know what I'm saying? It's like you controlled it, but they
That
ain't
part.
learned nothing. Yeah. So you got to be like, okay, this ain't working either. So let's see if we can do this together. And I know when I work with teachers with this, that's their biggest thing. I don't want to release, and this
Mm.
is why some teachers don't like to do group work because they're like, I
Yeah.
can't really control what's going on. But if you can kind of structure things and teach the students, they'll bring their power, they'll bring the community to it. So I would say control would be the biggest thing, and the last thing would kind of be again, not afraid for the students to be upset with you or disappointed, because even if you deliver it in a nice way and even you kind of pushing them, hey, it's on you, and my students every year we get to that process of, all right guys, I gotta, no, we're not doing this, you guys gotta bring something. They get upset and disappointed because they don't want to do certain things, and I have to get
Yeah.
past that, being a sensitive person, like, okay, you mad at me now. And every single time, once they get past that,
Yeah.
being there like, okay, this is one of the best things that ever happened to me. So control and just not wanting the students, getting over the students being upset.
I think we as teachers got to remember, like you're saying, that growth never comes from being comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost embedded in our job description to make our students uncomfortable, which means they're not going to like us. That's the point of teaching. The point of teaching is that you grow. The point of teaching is that I make you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But that I do it, going back to your potluck experience, that I do it with the best seasoning called love. That I do it with an intentionality that says, and I mean, even now as I'm in, I've stepped into the dark side of school leadership. I tell students all the time, there are going to be moments where I am going to get on your last nerve. You're not going to like me sometimes. I want you to know that there are going to be some times where I might not like you. I'm always going to love you. And here's what that means. I'm always going to push you. I'm never going to accept less than your best. And when you bring it to me, I'm going to challenge you and push you to be great. They won't like it in the moment. And part of that, we just got to accept that, right? But the end result is that you've pushed that student to be a better version of themselves than when you found them. I appreciate you taking the time out, and I really do want to encourage our listeners to tap into your work. When I invite people out, yes, I want to amplify, and yes, I want to connect and build, but I've learned and been challenged by the people that I invite out. And so I want you to know your work does challenge me, push me, but I want to thank you for what you mean to education, what you mean to your students, and for so many that I'm sure have been affected by and love Ms. Tanner. Thank you.